Commander Xiaxtao clicked his mandibles in satisfaction as he reviewed the tactical display aboard the dreadnought Sovereign's Fist. The blue-green world spinning below them looked perfect for conquest. Abundant water, breathable atmosphere, and, according to their long-range scans, a primitive species that had barely managed to split the atom. The hegemony's newest target world would fall within cycles, maybe even rotations if the locals proved especially weak. Fleet status report. Xiaxtao commanded, his 6 arms working efficiently across multiple control surfaces. The bridge crew of the massive warship responded with crisp military precision, their various species united under the banner of hegemony dominance. All 7 battle groups holding position at optimal bombardment range. Commander, reported Subcommander Vexenai, her scaled hide gleaming under the bridge's amber lighting. Planetary defense analysis shows minimal orbital infrastructure. No energy shields detected around population centers. Their most advanced vessels appear to be primitive chemical fuel rockets. Xiaxtao's secondary eyes focused on the tactical readout, while his primary eyes continued monitoring the bridge. 300 ships of the line, each one capable of glassing a continent. Fighter squadrons numbering in the thousands. Ground forces that had conquered 47 worlds for the hegemony, against a species that still used projectile weapons and burned fossil fuels for energy. Fascinating, mused science officer Krelpa from his station, tentacles dancing across holographic displays. The dominant species calls their world Earth, and themselves humans. Bipedal, remarkably fragile physiology. Average lifespan of roughly 80 local years. They've achieved basic space flight, but haven't even established permanent colonies on their own satellite. How disappointingly primitive, Xiaxtao said, though something in the scientist's tone suggested there was more to report. Continue your analysis, Krelpa. Well, Commander, there are some peculiarities in their historical data streams we've intercepted. These humans appear to have an unusual relationship with conflict. In their recent history alone, they've engaged in 2 planetary wars involving nearly every major population center on their world. Standard territorial disputes, Vexenai commented dismissively. Every species fights over resources before achieving interstellar capability. Actually, no. Krelpa's tentacles writhed in what his species expressed as confusion. The scale is unprecedented for a single-world species. In their Second World War, they produced over 300,000 aircraft, hundreds of thousands of armored vehicles, and billions of projectile weapons. The industrial capacity they demonstrated while simultaneously fighting on multiple continents is remarkable for their technological level. Xiaxtao's attention sharpened. The hegemony had learned not to underestimate species that showed unusual military aptitude, even with primitive technology. What casualties did they sustain in these conflicts? Conservative estimates suggest 50 to 80 million fatalities in the Second Global War alone. But here's what's truly strange, Commander. They continued fighting, not just surviving, but increasing production output while taking these losses. Their largest population group lost over 27 million citizens, but drove enemy forces back across an entire continent. The bridge fell silent except for the ambient hum of ship systems. Even battle-hardened hegemony officers found those numbers sobering. Most species sued for peace after losing a fraction of that percentage of their population. Perhaps they're simply too primitive to understand when they're beaten, suggested Weapons Officer Thakmore, his rocky carapace shifting as he spoke. Lower intelligence often correlates with irrational persistence in hopeless situations. I'm not so certain, Krelpa continued, his tentacles now moving in agitated patterns. I've been analyzing their entertainment and educational data streams. They have an entire genre of stories celebrating what they call last stands and fighting against impossible odds. Their children learn about something called the Alamo, where 189 defenders held off thousands until the last man died. They turned it into a rallying cry. 200 against thousands hardly seems significant, Thakmore rumbled. It's not the numbers that concern me, Krelpa replied. It's their cultural response to it. Instead of viewing it as a tactical failure to be avoided, they mythologized it. They teach it to their young as inspiration. Their military academies study it as an example of proper behavior when facing overwhelming odds. Commander Zoyaxtal felt his confidence wavering slightly. The hegemony preferred conquering species that surrendered quickly when faced with superior force. A species that viewed hopeless last stands as inspiration rather than cautionary tales could prove complicated. What about their current military capabilities? He asked. Surely a species that hasn't achieved faster-than-light travel poses minimal threat to our forces. Their weapons are indeed primitive by our standards, Krelpor acknowledged. But they have some interesting developments. They possess thermonuclear weapons capable of destroying their own cities. More concerning, they've created enough of these weapons to destroy their entire planetary surface multiple times over. They armed themselves to extinction? Vex and I asked, incredulous. How remarkably stupid. That's just it. Krelpa's voice took on an uncertain tone. They developed these weapons during a prolonged standoff between two major power groups. For over 40 local years, both sides possessed the capability to end their civilization. But instead of using them or surrendering to the more powerful group, they engaged in smaller proxy conflicts while building more weapons. The standoff only ended when one side's economic system collapsed. So they do understand deterrence, ZYXTAL noted. Perhaps they're not completely irrational. Commander, I'm detecting movement in their orbital infrastructure, Communications Officer Yilnex announced suddenly. Multiple launch signatures from several continental landmasses. Primitive chemical rockets, but they're launching in significant numbers. ZYXTAL turned his attention to the tactical display. Dozens of small craft were lifting off from the human world, most heading toward orbital stations or their satellite. Nothing that could threaten hegemony forces, but the coordination was impressive for a species without unified planetary government. They've detected our presence, Vex and I observed. Are they attempting to evacuate their leadership to orbital facilities? Negative, Yilnex reported after consulting his instruments. These appear to be cargo missions. They're moving supplies and personnel to existing orbital installations. And, Commander, they're broadcasting on multiple frequencies. The transmissions aren't random panic signals. Put it through universal translation, ZYXTAL ordered. The bridge speakers crackled to life with an unfamiliar voice speaking in measured, calm tones. This is General Sarah Chun, United Earth Defense Coordinator, broadcasting to the vessels maintaining position at Luna's L4 point. We know you're there. We know you're scanning our world. We know you're probably deciding whether we're worth conquering or if you should just wipe us out and take our planet. Stunned silence filled the bridge. The humans not only knew exactly where the hegemony fleet was positioned, but had identified their intentions with uncomfortable accuracy. We figure you're looking at our technology level and thinking this will be easy, General Chen's voice continued. You're probably right. Your ships are obviously far beyond anything we can build. But before you make your final decision, you might want to consider a few things about us. How do they detect us? Tokmur demanded. Our stealth systems are rated against sensor arrays 50 times more sophisticated than anything they possess. Unknown, Yilnex admitted. But their transmission is definitely directed at our exact position. They're not broadcasting blindly. General Chen's voice remained steady. We've been watching you for 3 days. Yes, we see you. No, we can't do much about your technology advantage. But here's what you might not have figured out about humans yet. We don't stay down. Sir, Vex and I said quietly, recommend we begin bombardment immediately. This species shows signs of being more troublesome than our initial assessment indicated. But ZYXTAL held up a primary arm. Something about the human's tone intrigued him. There was no pleading, no fear, no attempt at negotiation. Just a calm, almost conversational delivery of information. You're probably studying our history right now, Chen continued. You've seen our wars, our weapons, maybe even our entertainment. You might think you understand us. But there's something your analysis probably missed. We've never fought anyone like you before. Krelpoes tentakles vritet nervously. Commander, I recommend we investigate their orbital installations more thoroughly before proceeding. Their confidence level seems disproportionate to their technological capabilities. Every time we've faced a stronger enemy, we've learned, Chin's broadcast continued. Every time we've been outgunned, we've found ways to adapt. Every time someone thought we were beaten, we've surprised them. We beat the British Empire with farmers carrying muskets. We beat the Nazis with production lines and determination. We beat nuclear annihilation by being too stubborn to give up. Commander, Yilnex interrupted, I'm detecting significant energy buildups around their orbital installations. Not weapon signatures exactly, but something. And here's the thing about humans that your analysis definitely missed, Chen said, her tone remaining maddeningly calm. We've spent the last 70 years preparing for this exact scenario. Not you specifically, but someone like you, someone from out there who thinks Earth looks like easy pickings. ZYXTAL's mandibles clicked rapidly. Elaborate on those energy signatures, Yilnex. They appear to be power distribution networks, but the output levels are far beyond what their technology should be capable of generating. It's almost as if they've been concealing their actual capabilities. So here's our offer, General Chen concluded. Take your fleet and leave. Find some other world to conquer. Because if you attack us, we're going to teach you what humans do when someone threatens our home. And, trust me, you don't want that education. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. ZYXTAL studied the tactical display, noting that human orbital activity had increased dramatically during the broadcast. More launches, more energy buildups, and now his sensors were detecting previously hidden installations on their satellite. Commander, Science Officer Krelpa said hesitantly, I'm beginning to think our initial assessment may have been incomplete. How so? The historical data I analyzed focused on their conflicts with each other. But I'm now noticing patterns in their theoretical science and entertainment that suggest they've been contemplating warfare against technologically superior opponents for much of their recorded history. They have extensive fictional literature exploring scenarios very similar to our current situation. Fiction hardly constitutes military planning, Vex and I pointed out. Normally, no. But these humans appear to use fictional scenarios as a form of distributed strategic thinking. Millions of their population consume and contribute to scenarios involving planetary invasion, resistance against superior technology, asymmetric warfare tactics, and methods for defeating enemies with advantages in firepower, numbers, or technological sophistication. ZYXTAL considered this. The hegemony had encountered species that prepared for theoretical threats, but none that seemed to have made a cultural pastime of it. There's something else, Krelpa continued. Their space program isn't as primitive as we initially thought. Those orbital installations have been under construction for decades, supposedly for scientific research. But the power requirements and structural specifications would also be suitable for military applications. Weapons platforms. Thakmore asked his weapons systems automatically beginning threat assessment routines. Unknown, but possible. More concerning is their satellite. Our initial scans showed a dead, airless rock with minimal human presence. But I'm now detecting extensive subsurface installations that were somehow hidden from our long-range reconnaissance. Commander ZYXTAL felt the first stirrings of genuine unease. The hegemony's success was built on overwhelming technological superiority applied to less advanced species. When facing opponents who might have prepared for such encounters, the equation became more complex. Sir, Communications Officer Yilnex announced, we're receiving another transmission. Different source, much stronger signal. From where? Their satellite, sir. Luna. The signal is originating from the far side, previously hidden from our scans. Put it through. A new voice filled the bridge, older than General Chen's, with a slight accent that universal translation couldn't quite smooth out. Greetings, Hegemony Fleet. This is Dr. Klaus Weber, director of the Luna Defense Initiative. We thought you might appreciate a more detailed explanation of Earth's defensive capabilities before you commit to a course of action you might regret. ZYXTAL's 4 hearts began beating in an accelerated pattern that is species associated with pre-combat stress. The humans not only knew about the hegemony, they knew the organization's name. For the past 40 years, ever since we achieved reliable orbital capability, we've been preparing for this day. Not because we knew you specifically were coming, but because we knew someone would eventually find Earth and decide it looked appetizing. On the tactical display, new signatures began appearing around Luna's far side. Structures that hadn't been there moments ago, or had been so effectively concealed that hegemony sensors couldn't detect them. We've spent 4 decades studying every theoretical scenario for defending a single world against a technologically superior invasion force. We've run millions of simulations, built thousands of prototypes, and tested every desperate idea our species could conceive. Most importantly, we've prepared for fighting an enemy we can't match ship for ship or weapon for weapon. Commander, Weapons Officer Thakmore reported, his voice tight with concern. Those Luna installations are powering weapon systems. Energy signatures suggest directed energy weapons of unknown design. Not consistent with human technological base, but definitely artificial. Dr. Weber's voice continued with disturbing calm. We've learned a few things about asymmetric warfare over the centuries. The key isn't matching your enemy's strength. It's making yourself too expensive to conquer, too costly to destroy, too dangerous to ignore, but too troublesome to occupy. Sir, Vex and I said urgently, recommend immediate withdrawal to safer distance pending further intelligence gathering. But before ZYXTAL could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the bridge. The tactical display exploded with new contacts as previously invisible human installations throughout their solar system suddenly became active. Asteroid mining facilities revealed themselves as fortified weapons platforms. Scientific probes in the outer system turned out to be surveillance networks. What had appeared to be empty space around the human homeworld was actually filled with hidden infrastructure. Did we pick the right world? ZYXTAL whispered, his confidence evaporating as he realized the humans had been watching, waiting, and preparing for decades. Dr. Weber's voice took on an almost apologetic tone. We really do hope you'll reconsider your plans for Earth. Because if you don't, you're about to learn why humans are the only species that turned warfare into both an art form and a science. And trust me, Commander YXTAL, you don't want to be our first practical exam in interstellar combat. The fact that the human knew his name sent ice through ZYXTAL's circulatory system. How long had they been watching? How much did they know? As if reading his thoughts, Dr. Weber concluded, we know more about you than you think, Commander. We've been listening to your communications, studying your technology, and preparing appropriate countermeasures. So I'll ask one more time, politely, did you really pick the right world for this? Commander ZYXTAL stared at the tactical display as his carefully planned invasion turned into a nightmare of unexpected complications. Red warning indicators cascaded across every screen as hidden human installations throughout their solar system revealed themselves. What had seemed like a primitive backwater world was transforming into a fortress that had been 40 years in the making. Status report, all stations. He ordered, trying to maintain command composure while his confidence crumbled. Sir, detecting massive energy buildups throughout the system, reported Sensors Officer Chintao, her voice tight with professional alarm. Previously hidden installations on 17 asteroids for artificial satellites we somehow missed, and structures embedded in the polar ice caps of both planetary satellites. Total estimated weapons platforms now exceed 300 separate installations. 300. Subcommander Vex and I's scales shifted to a pale color indicating stress. How did we miss an entire defensive network of that magnitude? Science Officer Krelpa's tentacles writhed in patterns indicating extreme agitation. Commander, I'm analyzing their concealment methods. They didn't build these installations recently. based on energy signatures and structural degradation patterns. Some of these platforms have been operational for decades. They've been hiding a military space program inside what appeared to be scientific exploration and commercial development. Impossible, Weapons Officer Thakmore rumbled. Our reconnaissance protocols are designed to penetrate any concealment technology available to pre-interstellar species. Apparently not, Krelper replied grimly. They've used techniques we never anticipated because they seem so primitive. Radar-absorbing materials that mimic natural asteroid composition. Installations built inside genuine mining operations that serve dual purposes. Power distribution networks disguised as commercial satellite constellations. They've hidden military infrastructure by making it look exactly like civilian development. Communications Officer Yilnex suddenly straightened at his station. Commander, incoming transmission from the Luna installations. Multiple sources coordinated broadcast. Put it through. Dr. Weber's voice returned, but now accompanied by several others. Commander Zoyaxtao, this is the Luna Defense Command Center. You're now looking at 40 years of human preparation for exactly this scenario. I hope you're impressed, because we certainly are by your fleet. 7 battle groups, 300 ships of a line, enough firepower to sterilize a continent. Under normal circumstances, we wouldn't stand chance. A younger voice joined the transmission. This is Colonel Martinez, commanding the Asteroid Belt Defense Network. The good news for you, Commander, is that you're absolutely right about our technological disadvantage. Your ships are faster, your weapons hit harder, and your shields are far beyond anything we can generate. Then, why do you continue this pointless defiance? ZYXTAL demanded, opening a communication channel. Because, a third voice replied with distinct amusement, you're thinking like someone who's used to fighting fair fights. This is Captain Sarah O'Brien, commanding the Outer System Surveillance Grid. We haven't fought a fair fight in 300 years, and we don't plan to start now. Dr. Weber's voice took on a professorial tone. Let me explain the human approach to asymmetric warfare, Commander. When facing a superior enemy, you don't meet them head-on. You make them fight on your terms, in your territory, by your rules. You turn their advantages into disadvantages. On the tactical display, ZYXTAL watched as human installations throughout the system began coordinating their movements. Platforms that had appeared to be static installations were revealing mobility capabilities. Asteroid mining ships were deploying military equipment. Even their primitive chemical fuel rockets were repositioning in patterns that looked disturbingly like attack formations. Your first disadvantage, Colonel Martinez explained, is that you came here to conquer, not to destroy. Destroying a world is easy. Conquering it while keeping it useful requires restraint, precision, and control. That limits your tactical options. Your second disadvantage, Captain O'Brien continued, is that you're operating in our home system. We know every asteroid, every orbital path, every gravitational anomaly. You're navigating by instruments in territory we've been mapping for decades. And your third disadvantage, Dr. Weber concluded, is that you're used to fighting enemies who think like you do. Centralized command, linear tactics, battles decided by superior technology applied conventionally. But humans don't think conventionally when survival is at stake. Suddenly, alarms shrieked throughout the hegemony fleet as the first human attack commenced. But it wasn't anything resembling conventional fleet engagement. Sir, Yilnex shouted over the alarm klaxons. Massive electromagnetic pulse detected throughout the fleet. Source unknown. Shields are fluctuating, but holding, Thakmore reported. But what delivered an EMP with that level of power? I'm not detecting any human vessels in weapons range. Check the asteroid field, Krelpa suggested urgently. If they've weaponized their mining charges. The tactical display confirmed his suspicion. 3 asteroids that had been positioned along the fleet's approach vector had simultaneously detonated shaped nuclear devices, creating a coordinated electromagnetic pulse that had struck the entire hegemony formation. Not enough to cause serious damage, but sufficient to disrupt systems and demonstrate capability. Clever, ZYXTAL admitted reluctantly. They used the asteroids themselves as weapons platforms, sacrificing them to deliver a system-wide attack. Commander, Dr. Weber's voice returned. That was just our way of saying hello. We want to make sure we have your attention before we explain the rules of engagement for fighting humans on their home ground. Rules? Bixney snarled. You're hardly in a position to dictate terms to a hegemony battle fleet. Actually, we are, Captain O'Brien replied pleasantly. Because we're not trying to defeat your fleet in direct combat. That would be impossible. We're trying to make conquering Earth so expensive and time-consuming that you'll decide it's not worth the effort. Colonel Martinez took over the explanation. Rule 1. Every human installation you destroy costs us resources we've already written off as acceptable losses. But every installation you destroy will also cost you time, ammunition, and positioning. We have thousands of installations. You have 7 battle groups. Rule 2, Dr. Weber continued. Every day you spend fighting us is another day our evacuation and dispersal protocols continue. We've been moving our most important people and resources off-world for weeks. The longer this takes, the less you'll actually capture, even if you win. Rule 3, O'Brien concluded, we're not fighting to destroy your fleet. We're fighting to make you leave. Every tactical victory you achieve will be temporary, expensive, and followed by another challenge designed to wear down your resources and resolve. ZYXTAL studied the tactical situation with growing unease. The humans were right about their strategic position. The hegemony fleet possessed overwhelming firepower, but they were operating far from their supply lines against an enemy that had been preparing defensive positions for decades. Sir, Weapons Officer Thakmore reported, the asteroid belt installations are maneuvering into attack positions. They're using mining ship drives and construction equipment, but they're coordinating like a trained fleet. Because they are, Krelper realized. Commander, their asteroid mining operations weren't just cover for military installations. They were training exercises. Their civilian space workers have been practicing fleet maneuvers disguised as commercial operations. Their entire space program is dual purpose, Vex and I added with grudging respect. Scientific research that doubles as reconnaissance. Mining operations that train space combat pilots. Construction projects that build military fortifications. They've militarized their entire civilian space infrastructure without anyone realizing it. The next human attack came from an unexpected direction. The tactical displays suddenly showed multiple new contacts approaching from the system's outer reaches. Dozens of objects moving at high velocity toward the fleet's position. Incoming projectiles, Thakmore announced. Multiple high-velocity contacts, but they're not showing energy signatures consistent with powered weapons. What are they? ZYXTAL demanded. Unknown, sir. They appear to be metallic objects of various sizes. No active guidance systems detected, but trajectory calculations show impact with fleet positions in approximately 40 minutes. Dr. Weber's voice provided explanation. Commander, meet humanity's answer to superior shield technology. We can't build energy weapons powerful enough to penetrate your defensive systems. But we can accelerate solid objects to velocities that make energy irrelevant. Kinetic kill vehicles, Colonel Martinez elaborated. We've been launching them from the outer system for the past 3 days, ever since we detected your arrival. Chunks of metal accelerated to significant fractions of light speed using gravitational slingshot maneuvers around our outer planets. Your shields are designed to deflect energy weapons and absorb impacts from conventional projectiles, Captain O'Brien explained helpfully. But they're not designed to handle solid tungsten rods moving at 12% of light speed. Physics is physics, Commander. Mass times velocity equals momentum, and momentum doesn't care about your defensive technology. ZYXTAL felt his command confidence evaporating entirely. Evasive maneuvers, all ships. Maximum acceleration. But as the fleet began changing position, new problems emerged. The human surveillance network had been tracking their movements continuously, and their response patterns were being predicted with disturbing accuracy. Sir, Yilnex reported, the humans are broadcasting detailed course projections for our evasive maneuvers. They're predicting our movements before we make them. How is that possible? Bixnidi Mandith. Because Dr. Weber's voice carried a tone of professional satisfaction. We've been studying hegemony fleet tactics for years. Your communications aren't as secure as you think they are, Commander. We've been intercepting and analyzing tactical data from your previous conquests. We know how your species thinks, how your ships move, and how your commanders make decisions under pressure. Science Officer Krelpa's tentacles writhed in what his species expressed as horrified realization. Commander, they've been preparing specifically to fight us. Not just any space-based enemy. Us. The hegemony. They know our standard operating procedures. More than that, Captain O'Brien added cheerfully, we've been developing countermeasures specifically designed to exploit hegemony tactical doctrine. Your formation spacing, your communication protocols, your targeting priorities, your standard responses to various threat scenarios. We've spent decades figuring out how to turn your own procedures against you. The kinetic projectiles began arriving with devastating precision. Ships throughout the fleet found their evasive maneuvers anticipated, their defensive positions predicted. The humans weren't just throwing metal at them randomly. They were delivering precisely calculated impacts designed to force specific tactical responses. Flagship Dominator reports shield failure in sectors 7 through 12. Thakmore announced. Cruiser Inevitable has lost main propulsion. Battle Group 3 is requesting permission to withdraw to safer distance. Negative, ZYX Tau responded automatically, then reconsidered. Actually, all ships withdraw to maximum sensor range. We need to reassess this situation. As the hegemony fleet pulled back from their intended bombardment positions, Colonel Martinez's voice carried a note of satisfaction. Wise decision, Commander. You're learning the first lesson of fighting humans. We don't fight battles we can't win, but we're very good at making sure our enemies can't win either. This is only the beginning, Dr. Weber warned. You've seen our passive defenses and our opening moves. If you continue this invasion, you'll discover that humans have spent centuries perfecting the art of making victory too expensive to achieve. We're giving you one more opportunity to withdraw, Captain O'Brien concluded, because our next demonstration will be considerably less gentle than what you've experienced so far. ZYX Tau stared at the tactical display, showing his fleet in full retreat from an enemy that shouldn't have been able to threaten them. 7 battle groups, 300 ships of a line, the pride of the hegemony military, forced to withdraw by a species that hadn't even achieved faster-than-light travel. Commander, Vex and I said quietly, perhaps we should consider the human suggestion. This is not developing according to any scenario we've trained for. Sir, Krelpa added urgently, I'm detecting new energy buildups throughout their system. Whatever they're planning next, it's going to be significantly larger than what they've shown us so far. Earth, Commander, Yilnex said softly. Maybe we should retreat. Zewextal's mandibles clicked rapidly as he considered options that were all becoming increasingly unpalatable. The humans had turned their entire solar system into a fortress, their entire space program into a military training exercise, and their entire culture into preparation for exactly this scenario. All ships, he commanded reluctantly, maintain position at maximum sensor range. We need intelligence before proceeding further. But deep in his four hearts, Commander ZYX Tau was beginning to suspect that the humans were right. Maybe they hadn't picked the right world after all. Commander ZYX Tau had spent 30 years conquering worlds for the hegemony. He'd broken defensive lines, shattered orbital fortresses, and watched entire civilizations surrender rather than face the overwhelming might of hegemony battle fleets. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for humanity's approach to interstellar warfare. Status report. He ordered, though he dreaded the answer. Fleet holding position at maximum sensor range, Subcommander Vex and I reported. All vessels maintaining combat readiness, but crew morale is concerning, sir. Word has spread throughout the fleet about the humans' capabilities. Many are questioning whether we should continue this operation. ZYXTAL's mandibles clicked in frustration. The humans had achieved something remarkable. They'd made his veterans nervous about fighting a pre-interstellar species. The psychological impact was almost as devastating as their tactical surprises. "Sir," Science Officer Krelpa announced, tentacles writhing with agitation, "I've completed analysis of the human defensive systems. The situation is worse than we initially assessed." "Explain." "Their entire civilization has been structured around preparation for planetary defense. What we interpreted as normal social and economic development was actually systematic militarization disguised as civilian activity. Their educational system trains problem-solving skills specifically applicable to asymmetric warfare. Their entertainment industry explores scenarios involving resistance against superior force. Their economic system prioritizes redundancy and distributed production." "How did our intelligence miss this?" demanded Weapons Officer Thackmore. "Because it looks exactly like normal civilizational development from the outside," Krelpa replied. "Schools that teach critical thinking and resourcefulness. Entertainment that emphasizes human persistence and ingenuity. An economy that avoids single points of failure. The militarization is so deeply integrated into their culture that it's invisible unless you know what to look for." Communications Officer Yilnex suddenly straightened. "Commander, receiving transmission from Earth. Multiple sources, high-priority encryption. Put it through." Dr. Weber's voice filled the bridge, but his tone had shifted from professorial explanation to something much more serious. "Commander ZYXTAL, this is your final warning. We've demonstrated that our defensive capabilities exceed your initial assessment. We've shown you that conquering Earth will be more expensive than you anticipated. Now we're going to show you why attacking our world is the worst strategic decision you could possibly make. Threat assessment, all stations, ZYXTAL ordered." "Sir," Sensor Officer Chintao reported, detecting massive energy buildups throughout the human system. "Every installation we've identified is powering up simultaneously. Energy levels are approaching theoretical maximums for their technology base." Colonel Martinez's voice joined the transmission. "Commander, for 40 years we've been preparing for this day. Not just building weapons, but designing a strategy that turns invasion into a nightmare scenario for any attacking force. We call it the Terran Doctrine, and you're about to become the first enemy force to experience its full implementation. The first principle," Captain O'Brien explained, "is that you can't conquer what you can't hold. Every human city, every orbital station, every asteroid mining facility has been prepared for siege warfare. We don't just have defensive positions. We have redundant defensive positions backed up by mobile command centers and distributed supply networks. The second principle," Dr. Weber continued, "is that you can't occupy a population that refuses to be governed. Every human on Earth has been trained in resistance techniques. Our children learn about sabotage and guerrilla warfare in history class. Our civilians know how to organize underground networks and maintain resistance operations." ZYXTAL felt ice crystallizing in his circulatory system. The hegemony's standard conquest model required cooperative local populations to maintain control over conquered territories. A species that trained their entire population in resistance techniques would be impossible to govern effectively. "But the third principle is the one that should really concern you," Colonel Martinez said, his tone carrying grim satisfaction. "We don't fight defensive wars. We fight total wars. If you attack Earth, you're not just fighting our military. You're fighting our entire civilization. And our civilization has been preparing for total war against technologically superior opponents for generations. Demonstrate," ZYXTAL challenged, though he was beginning to suspect he would regret the request. "With pleasure," Dr. Weber replied. "Initiating Terran Doctrine implementation. All stations, execute Operation Prometheus." The tactical display exploded with activity as human installations throughout the solar system began executing coordinated maneuvers that defied every assumption about pre-interstellar species capabilities. Hidden platforms revealed themselves, asteroid bases launched fighter squadrons, and the space around Earth transformed into a three-dimensional battlefield extending from planetary orbit to the outer reaches of the solar system. "Sir," Weapons Officer Thakmore reported, voice tight with disbelief, "they're launching fighters. Thousands of them. Single-pilot craft with minimal life support, maximum maneuverability, and... Commander, they're accelerating at rates that should be lethal to biological pilots. Because they're not afraid to die." Captain O'Brien's voice carried pride and sadness in equal measure. Every pilot out there volunteered for missions with statistically minimal survival probability. "They're not trying to survive, Commander. They're trying to take as many of your ships with them as possible." "Suicide attacks," Vex and I asked, horrified. "Sacrifice attacks," Dr. Weber corrected. "There's a difference. Suicide implique desperation. Sacrifice implies choice. These pilots chose to trade their lives for strategic advantage because they believe protecting Earth is worth any price." The human fighter formations began their attack runs, but their tactics were unlike anything in hegemony combat doctrine. Instead of targeting ships directly, they focused on sensor arrays, communication equipment, and weapons systems. They weren't trying to destroy the fleet. They were trying to blind it, deafen it, and cripple its offensive capabilities. "They're not fighting to win," Krelper realized. "They're fighting to make victory meaningless. Even if we destroy every human fighter, our fleet will be so damaged that we'll be vulnerable to counterattack from their remaining installations." "Sir," Yilnex announced urgently, detecting launches from the outer system. "Analysis suggests..." "Commander, they're launching their entire civilian population." "What?" "Evacuation pods, cargo vessels, generation ships, everything capable of spaceflight. The humans are abandoning their home world while simultaneously defending it." Dr. Weber's voice provided explanation. "The fourth principle of the Terran Doctrine, Commander. Earth is our home, but humanity is our species. If you conquer our world, you get a depopulated rock. Our people, our knowledge, our culture, our technology all survive out there among the stars. They're seeding the galaxy with human colonies," Colonel Martinez added. "Every ship that escapes carries genetic diversity, technological specifications, and, most importantly, the knowledge of how to fight the hegemony. Even if you win here, you've just created thousands of new enemies scattered throughout space." ZYXTAL watched the tactical display in growing horror as the implications became clear. The humans weren't just defending their world. They were ensuring that attacking them would spread human resistance throughout the galaxy, turning every future hegemony conquest into a potential encounter with prepared, determined, and technologically innovative enemies. "Sir," Thakmore reported, "the fighter attacks are proving highly effective. We're sustaining significant damage to non-essential systems throughout the fleet. Recommend immediate withdrawal to regroup and reassess." "And that brings us to the fifth principle," Captain O'Brien concluded. "Every battle teaches us something new about fighting technologically superior enemies. Win or lose, we learn. But you only get to fight us once while we're still primitive. Next time you encounter humans, we'll be spacefaring, armed with everything we learned from this engagement, and very, very motivated to demonstrate improved capabilities." "Commander," Science Officer Krelpa said quietly, "recommend immediate fleet withdrawal. This species represents an unprecedented threat to hegemony expansion. Their defensive doctrine could be copied by other civilizations. Their resistance techniques could spread throughout our occupied territories. Their technological adaptability could eventually challenge our military supremacy." ZYXTAL stared at the chaos on his tactical display as human fighters continued their devastating attacks on his fleet systems, while human civilians fled their world in every direction, carrying with them the seeds of galactic resistance. In 40 years of military service, he had never encountered anything like humanity's approach to warfare. All ships, he commanded, his voice heavy with defeat. General retreat. Maximum acceleration. We're leaving this system immediately. Commander, Dr. Weber's voice carried a note of respect. You're making the right choice. Earth was never going to be an easy conquest. We spent 40 years making sure of that. But here's something for your reports back to Hegemony Command, Colonel Martinez added. Humans remember their enemies. We remember who attacked us, and we remember what they did. Earth might be the first world you've encountered that was ready for you, but it won't be the last. We'll make sure of that. Every species you've conquered in the past is watching this engagement, Captain O'Brien concluded. They're learning that resistance is possible. They're seeing that preparation works. They're discovering that even the mighty hegemony can be forced to retreat. As the hegemony fleet began its humiliating withdrawal from Earth space, alarms started sounding on the bridge of every ship. Not attack warnings this time, but emergency alerts from throughout hegemony space. Sir, Yilnex reported with growing alarm, receiving priority communications from Hegemony Command. Multiple conquered worlds are reporting simultaneous uprisings. Colonial garrisons are requesting immediate reinforcement. How many worlds? ZYXTAL demanded. All of them, sir. Every occupied planet in hegemony space is experiencing organized resistance. The human engagement has been broadcast throughout our communication networks. Every conquered species has been watching. Dr. Weber's final transmission reached them as the fleet accelerated away from Earth. Commander, you came here to conquer one world. Instead, you've inspired liberation movements on every world the hegemony has ever conquered. We told you that attacking Earth was the worst strategic decision you could make. We weren't talking about the damage to your fleet. We were talking about the damage to your empire. Commander ZYXTAL watched Earth shrinking in his sensors as reports continued flooding in from throughout hegemony space. Conquered worlds declaring independence. Colonial garrisons under siege. Trade routes disrupted. The carefully maintained order of the hegemony's interstellar empire crumbling as dozens of species simultaneously decided that if humans could resist, perhaps they could too. Commander, Vex and I said quietly, what do we tell Hegemony Command? ZYXTAL considered the question as he watched his career, his fleet, and possibly his entire civilization's dominance dissolving around him. The humans had been right about everything. They had turned their entire species into a weapon designed specifically to destroy empires like the hegemony. Not through superior firepower, but through superior preparation, superior determination, and superior understanding of how to turn strength into weakness. We tell them the truth, he finally replied. We picked the wrong world. We attacked the wrong species. And we probably just ended the hegemony's expansion era. Behind them, Earth continued its broadcast to every corner of the galaxy, spreading the news that resistance was possible, preparation worked, and even primitive species could defeat seemingly invincible enemies. The Terran Doctrine was no longer just humanity's defensive strategy. It was becoming the galaxy's new approach to freedom. The age of easy conquest was over. Humanity had made sure of that.